Moving on now from GCSEs, we're going to look at the first year of A-Level RS, only now it's with AQA instead of OCR. And we're going to look at the world religion side of the course by dealing with the Sikh gurus, and today it's Guru Nanak. Now, while I will be doing revision videos for all 10 gurus, it would appear that AQA want you to focus more on, well, to quote their spec, with particular reference to Guru Nanak, Guru Arjan, Guru Hargobind, Guru Tegh Bahadur, and Guru Gobind Singh. So if you're going to do a lot of revision, I personally would focus on those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Sikhs, because they're the ones that AQA want you to pay a bit of particular attention to. Also, Gurus 7 and 8, which I think is RI and Harkushan, they are an incredibly short topic. They're so short we don't even learn about them at school. So honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if I don't end up making a video for those two, but I wouldn't worry about prioritising the 7th and 8th Guru as revision material. Also, my teacher, she's predicting that Guru Nanak will be the Guru for this year's exam. So I have done this particular video in quite extensive detail for you. Finally, just before we move on, as of the 2nd of April, you have 41 days until your exam. And if that didn't scare you enough, then that's about 4 weeks as a return from Easter holidays. So if you haven't started revising, definitely start doing it now. These videos won't cover everything you need to know. They're just the core basics that you should ideally know pretty much everything about, should you want to get above about a C. Okay, that's cool. So Guru Nanak, a bit about his life. He lived from 1469 to 1539, and he was the Guru from 1499 to the year he died, and obviously he was the first Guru. His main contributions to what is later to become the Sikh Panth, bear in mind it isn't called Sikhism just yet, is, he started it. He brought in the idea of equality. He began the elimination of caste. Caste we'll look at in a bit. He composed quite a few hymns, took away the idea of meaningless rituals, and created, he brought about the idea of Wahi Guru, which is the Sikh god. Background knowledge for you then. A past paper question was examine the life and teachings of Guru Nanak, and in those sort of style questions is where your background knowledge comes into it for your AO1 questions. So a bit about Guru Nanak's background for you. He was born a Hindu, and he was a member of the, how do you pronounce that? I don't know how to pronounce that one, but of this caste in the Punjab, and that is basically the caste system is a Hindu system, or it's like a hierarchy. At the very top of the hierarchy, you have a caste called the Brahmins, and right at the bottom you have the untouchables, the Chalandas, I think it's pronounced. In fact, there might even be one below them. But anyway, the caste member that Nanak was, this one here, I'm going to go with Kshatriya or something like that. That is one below a Brahmin. So he's reasonably high up in the caste system, but he's not up there with the Brahmins. The Brahmins are the sort of people that the Hindu would go to worship with God and improve their karma. More background knowledge then. Hindus at the time of Nanak and for quite a while after as well, they were ruled under the Mughal Empire, and they were a non-secular Islamic government. By non-secular I mean religious. As a child, he rejected the sacred thread. Now in Hinduism, the sacred thread basically it puts a label on what caste you are. I'm pretty sure that might be wrong. It's worth checking that. But at the age of 13, he rejected his sacred thread, because obviously Nanak believes that you shouldn't be judged on your caste, you should be judged on your character. He travelled around a bit, and when he was doing so, he was accompanied by his childhood friend Madana, who was a Muslim and by profession a musician. Nanak was also married at 16 to a loving wife, who he also loved in return, and she was named, I'm going to go with Salakani, and she was the daughter of a pious merchant. She had two sons, Sri Chand in 1494 and Lakshmi Chand in 1497. Nanak also had a job as an accountant for a Muslim governor of Sultanpur, and it was there where he would, during the working days, he would work for that governor, but during the mornings and nights he would meditate and sing hymns with Madonna playing the rabab, and the rabab is sort of like a guitar, and that attracted quite a bit of attention, and eventually people started to join them. Now we have obviously Hinduism and Islam are quite key religions for the background knowledge of Nanak, so I've just put together from a sheet that my teacher gave me a list of things that is good to note about Hinduism and Islam for the background knowledge that you should need to know. In Hinduism you have the groups, again can't pronounce this one, I'm going to go with Vaishnavites. They are basically a group of Hindus who specifically worshipped Vishnu. So as opposed to, because obviously in Hinduism there's many gods, there's not just one god. There's this idea here of where you just worship one central god. That is exactly the same story down here with, I'm going to go with Shaivites, and they worship Shiva, another Hindu god. We have the Bhakti movement, and they are a group of Hindus who worshipped personally to God outside of the caste system. And there's this idea here of polytheistic worships of God. Now, polytheistic, obviously meaning many gods, basically is quite the opposite to Islam at the time, and well, it still is today. And that's the opposite of monotheistic, which is worship of one god. Sorry. The Naths, they were a group of poets who used music to worship. They were also aesthetics. That's a key thing to note down. One reason why Nanak didn't really like them too much. And the Sants, a very interesting group. The Sants are basically Hindus who have achieved spiritual enlightenment, and they embraced the Bhakti movement quite well and worshipped God by singing his praises, dancing, through movement, etc. They spoke of a personal relationship with God, not one that was dominated by caste, and also they were poets who wrote about God and enlightenment. If you want a quote, I would Google the one from W.H. MacLeod describing the Sants as one who knows the truth or one who has experienced ultimate reality. So that's the Sants view. We have also the idea of karma, reincarnation, and enlightenment that you can Google in about 5 minutes and understand it. Basically, the idea of death and rebirth. You may well have been taught in Sikhism by now about samsara. It's pretty much the same thing as that. Right, key facts about Islam that you should take note when it comes to background knowledge with Nanak. Sufism, monotheistic worships of God, so that is an idea of one God to worship. The 5 pillars of Islam, so essentially ground principles and rules to follow by. Fasting, statement of faith, almsgiving, which is charity, going on a pilgrimage, prayer, judgment, and heaven. The social aspects that you should probably want to take note on: the Hindu caste system, as we talked about before, pollution by gender and caste. Now this is new. This pollution isn't meant in the same way as we use it nowadays with CO2 emissions and whatnot. It's when we say pollution by caste, we mean that the people in basically the lower caste are pollutive to those in the higher caste. They're looked down on by those in the higher caste, and to mix together would be spiritually pollutive. Pollution by gender is where women are pollutive to men. So we also have extremes of wealth and the sadhu, who are a group of ascetics who retreated from everyday life. And just the political background knowledge for you. The Mughal Empire, again, as we were talking about before, they ruled India since the 11th century. And in terms of the emperor of the empire, there was to be complete control and submission. Hindus were paid heavy taxes and made subject to the emperor as well. So, Nanak obviously started or created the foundations for the Sikh Panth. Bear in mind, it isn't called Sikhism just yet. So what we need to know, well, Hinduism and Islam were basically the two central religions that Nanak experienced whilst growing up. And what he more or less did was took aspects of the two religions to make the foundations of what is later to be called Sikhism. He took the ideas of the Bhakti movement, those two which I couldn't pronounce from before, Sufism, the Sants, Lala, which I'll tell you about now, and the Islamic pillars. Lala was a poet, and she wrote about the idea of there being one God, as well as these two here who are Hindus but worshipped one God. So the pillars of Islam, they became the three pillars of Sikhism. They are now Vandkako, which is charity, which was the idea of almsgiving, which we talked about briefly before. Kurtkaro, which is honest living, so that would be like having a job that doesn't bring bloodshed. And Nam Simran, which is worship. We also have Nam Japo, and that's basically a group of Sikhs worshipping together. That may well have come out of the Bhakti movement. All of this, which I'm listing here, is stuff that Nanak has taken from the background knowledge that we looked at before and applied it to the foundations of Sikhism. So we also have Japji, which is the prayer of Nanak, and that is this thing here. I might as well read it out to you now. There is but one God, his name is truth, he is the creator, he fears none, he is without hate, he never dies, he is beyond the cycle of births and death, he is self-illuminated, he is realized by the kindness of the true God, he was true in the beginning, he was true when the ages commenced, and he has ever been true. He is also true now. Another key story for beginning the Sikh path is Nanak's enlightenment, so I'm going to have to take you through that story now. One morning, accompanied by his Muslim friend Madana, Nanak head off to bathe in the river Bain. Unfortunately, he didn't surface again, and it was inferred that he must have drowned. Pity. The Guru was searched for everywhere by the villagers, but wasn't found, and it said that he was in holy communion with God, and in Sikhism, God is called Waheguru. He eventually emerged from the river as an enlightened being, and he muttered the prayer of Japji, which is this one here that we talked about before, prayer of Japji, and he later on, just after coming out, a few minutes after coming out of the river, he delivered his famous quote, "There is neither Hindu nor Muslim." He was obviously 30 when this happened. He travelled from here on with Dana in the Indian subcontinent. There's a map for you here about his travels. You can get a ton of these on Google Images. And wherever he went along these travels, he could set up these local cells, which is called the manjis, and there himself, Madana and followers could recite hymns and meditate. Now, Nanak also taught about elimination of meaningless rituals. Now, here is a good example of a what in Nanak's mind was a meaningless ritual, and his teachings about it. At a pilgrimage centre on the river Ganges called Hardwar, Nanak found a large group of devotees. I'm pretty sure the devotees were Hindus, and they were all offering water to the sun. Let me just get a pen out so I can. Right, so as this chap is here, obviously he's offering water to the sun. And Nanak asks him, "Why do you throw water like that?" And they reply that they're offering it to their ancestors. And so Nanak also gets in the water at this point, and they ask him what he was doing, because obviously, as you can see here in this picture, he's not offering it to the sun, he's offering it in the completely opposite direction. And so they say to him, "What are you doing?" And Nanak says, "I'm sending water to my farm, which is dry." And they say, how will your water reach your crops so far away?" And then Nanak simply responded with, "If your water can reach your ancestors in the region of the sun, why can't mine reach my fields a short distance away?" So this is basically his way of teaching that if you're going to have a ritual, where you worship God, make it, logical, I suppose. Don't do it to like an impractical extent where it's clearly not worshipping God. Which leads us nicely into this, the teachings on the worship of God. When Nanak went to visit Mecca, he had travelled quite a distance, and he'd decided that he's going to have a break, he's going to lie down, and he falls asleep, unfortunately with his feet accidentally facing towards the Holy Kaaba. And that's a problem because in Islam and in quite a few other religions, the feet on a human being, the feet are considered the most how do I put this? The most unsanitary part of the body. So obviously they walk on the dirt of the ground quite a lot, and if you're going to be facing that towards the house of God, that's not quite an ideally good thing to do. So obviously some Muslims there were quite offended, and he was told by the watchman, "How dare you turn your feet towards the house of God?" And Nanak simply replied, "With good man, I am weary after a long journey. Kindly turn my feet in the direction where God is not." And that was Nanak's point in making that basically, since God is everywhere, well, at least he is in Sikhism, since God is everywhere, don't be so precise, I suppose, maybe punitive to an extent with your worship. Worship should be almost free in a way. You shouldn't be worshipping on this hour at this time in this particular way, facing that particular direction, and so on. Another story is when Nanak and Madana were travelling through a place called, I'm going to go with Saidpur or Saidpur maybe. They travelled through there during the invasion of the first Mughal Emperor Babur. Madana asked Nanak how come so many innocent people were being put to death alongside such few who were guilty. And Nanak told him to wait under a tree, where he was bitten by an ant, and in quite obviously a painful rage, he stamps on as many ants as he could. And then Nanak says to Madana, "You now know, Madana, why the innocent suffer along with the guilty." And in terms of worship of God, that's sort of a way of saying that, well, I suppose maybe you could suggest it's a bit of an AO2 thing here where your own opinion comes into it, but I'm going to go with the view how God works in mysterious ways. If you don't understand it, there's logic in it somewhere. Okay, so now the elimination of caste from Hinduism and bringing in the idea of equality. Obviously, Nanak believed in a casteless society, which brings us nicely onto this little picture down here. This is the Langar, and the Langar is very crucial for Nanak. It is very crucial for Sikhism today. The Langar, which roughly translates to either community kitchen or free kitchen, I think it actually is a place where anyone, no matter if you're an untouchable in the caste system or if you're a Brahmin, anyone can sit down with each other without judgment on their title. Men can sit with men, or men can sit with women even, and vice versa. They can serve each other, and so that's a way of Nanak showing his disapproval of pollution by gender that we talked about much earlier. He also shows tolerance through religion. Nanak is okay with religions mingling together. As two of his best friends were Madana, who was a Muslim, and Lenga, who was a Hindu. Nanak also initiated the concept of seva, which is selfless service, and every Sikh, even today, must undertake in their everyday lives. A good way that Sikhs do that nowadays is through the Langar. So that's pretty much the core basics that you should need to know about Guru Nanak. Obviously, who's next? Comes this chap, Guru Angad. I say Guru Angad's coming next. In terms of video making, I probably won't make him one just next, because obviously, as I said before, AQA want you to focus on Nanak, Arjan, Hargobind, Tegh Bahadur, and Gobind Singh. So I'll probably make a video on Arjan next. Okay then, well, until next time.